So it has been a while. Um, I'm actually a little rusty, and I got confused about how to use YouTube just for a little bit. I'm fine now, thank you. Um, but now I got to look at my pad and find my channel, and then find the chat. So let's see. So let's do that. Yeah. I'm actually not sure if anybody's going to be here since I did this. Since I did this till last minute. Yeah. So just let me give you all a chance to catch up, and I'll I'll tell you a little bit about what I've been doing and the point of this story. So just to remind you, um, I wrote a story called Lissel the Gorgon, and um, the draft that I wrote, the only well, I tried writing the story several times, um, and it didn't work, even though it's a really cool idea. The point of Lissel the Gorgon is that she's a modern day Medusa. That that is, she was kidnapped and raped by a god, um, and then she was given this power to turn people into stone. Anybody who looked at her would turn to stone. She doesn't particularly want this power, but that's what it is. She didn't want any of that shit to happen to her. You know, so that's pretty much Medusa's story. She was beautiful. She was in Athena's temple, probably a priestess. Poseidon, entranced by her beauty, um, especially her hair. Poseidon, um, Poseidon rapes her, and then Athena um, punishes her by turning her into Medusa, by turning her into a Gorgon, uh, a woman so hideous, in this case represented by the snakes for hair and the terrible visage on her face, that when people see her, they turn to stone. So, so the story that I wrote with Lissel, um, I was just having a really hard time getting to the heart of that story. So I thought, why don't I go back in time and write more about Lissel? Um, you know, what are her parents like? What is her what is her life like? Before any of this stuff ever happens to her. Um, and so I wrote this story, Lascelles' parents. It still needs a hell of a lot of work. I can't even tell you, but it's finished. Um, and I'm going to write several more stories leading up to Lissel the Gorgon. You know, and um, what I find, honestly, what I find interesting about it is that I might end up writing like a mosaic novel about Lissel. Lissel has a small but significant role in the Burlap Daughter. She is Zella's friend, the one who helps rescue her, and so that's pretty important. Um, yeah, so I'm going to toss Lissel in to various stories, but more on that, I'm going to look at her at these points in her life. Now, Lascelles' parents, that's a working title, by the way. Maybe I'll think of a better title. But Lascelles' parents, this story obviously focuses on them. And the next story, Lissel growing up with her aunt and uncle. Um, yeah, I guess you can tell Lascelles' parents do not end up happy. Yeah, crazy stuff happens, and we will get to that. But but anyways, I'm fascinated by the whole project now of all these various stories about Lissel leading up to what happens to her. I think that as I do this, I'm going to understand Lissel better, and um, yeah, and I'm going to be able to write her story better. You know, so that is the point of this. And I guess the other thing I find interesting is that this is like a writing assignment I gave myself. Okay. Um, Up until this story, I had written what I wanted to write. Okay. I mean, obviously in school, I wrote whatever my teachers told me to write. But when I was choosing what to write, I followed my muse, or however you want to say it. I followed like my own desires. You know, this is a story I want to tell. So this is the story I'm telling. And when I tried to do otherwise, somebody would give me a suggestion. Why don't you write this? And if it didn't speak to me, I would just shove it to the side. You know, like, sorry, I can't do it. I'd try, and it would fall apart. You know, it's not that people don't have cool ideas, but it's hard to write about them when you're not interested. You know, but here I am, Lissel's parent, and it's like a writing assignment. It's like I've been assigned something, and I have to do it. You know I'm the one assigning it, but what can I say? My previous works had been amateur, not in the sense that they were bad, but in the sense that they came from the love of what I was doing. This is professional, not in the sense that I'm getting paid, but in the sense that I'm doing this in order to uh, improve my craft, you know, and in this case, in particular, for that one story. Yeah. Okay. So, um, let's see. So what else can I tell you? Um, this story. Sorry. Um, yeah. Um, I've been trying to figure out how the hell to write, like with any kind of regularity. You know, um, like for example, I thought maybe I'll stream 3 nights a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Well, that that did not that did not work for me. There's Then I thought, why don't I stream in the morning? You know, but honestly, chaos followed me into the morning also. You know, um, unlike my friend Journey, whose job is physical. All of my jobs, all of my jobs. I teach online, and I sell books on Amazon. Um, so both of those jobs are mental, especially the teaching part. I teach composition, so when I'm done grading a set of papers, um, I am wiped out, mentally wiped out. You know, um, and it uses the same part of my brain that writing a story does. You know, um, and even a lot of the book stuff. Like I sell used books. You think that might not use a creative side, but it does when I have to make many individual small decisions about uh, about a book, whether to sell it, how to list it. There's a lot of these tiny little decisions, and again, I'm mentally wiped out by the time I'm done, especially with the combination of those two assignments, of those two working assignments. Um, and then you combine the stuff that's going on uh, with my wife's family. In short, my in-laws are old and not in the best health, so like when I wanted to stream in the morning, I'd get a phone call at 8 o'clock in the morning that something had to be done right now because somebody was hurting, in trouble, had to go to the hospital, the doctor, an appointment had been forgotten, et cetera, et cetera. Or in the evening, you know. So what can I say? You know, um, my life's full of chaos, so um, I'm trying to write as much as I can. I'm trying, um, but I can't commit to any set schedule. All right, so with that, let there be no further ado, and let's look at this story, Lissel's parents. Okay, so this is a short story. Um, the reality of this story is magical realism. Um, and I want to say something. That is the reality of it. That is, but there's an absurdist side to magical realism that I don't think I match. You know, like you know, some character in a in a magical realist story is traveling to his grandparents' ranch in the mountains of Colombia or something, and then when he gets there, you know, it's not 2017, it's 1817 or something, but it's still his grandparents, you know, um, you know, and then like something like that might happen, and um, I guess like a lot of magical realist stories lack causality. Um, I'm going to mispronounce this word. They lack um, they lack cause and effect, it, especially when it comes to reality. That's not a bad thing. I think that's really cool. But there's an underlying logic to my stories. But um, you know, I guess I'm more magical realist in the tradition of Philip K. Dick. He's been called a magical realist, and that, you know, um, but he's, if he is, maybe his magical realism is from like a science fiction angle, like mine is, and a lot of those South American writers are writing from a fantastic angle, from a fairy, sometimes almost like a fairy tale logic with them, you know. Um, you know, but I'm writing, you know, and again, Dick was writing too from a science fiction angle. Like when I read his story, A Little Something for Us Tempenauts, um, about these if I remember correctly, forget as if, hey, as if a trans realist. All right, I'll call myself that too. Um, yeah, yeah. But anyway, um, but so I was talking about Dick, and one of his stories has these astronauts um, that 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 keep, or temponauts. They keep going in forward in time and backward in time, and they keep being killed, but then coming back, and it's a terrible thing for them. Um, yeah, yeah. So it's a terrible thing for them, but I feel like there's an underlying logic to it. You know, it's just that I don't think Dick cares that much about the underlying logic. So Larry, hey, how are you? You know, um, or like in Man in the High Castle, when towards, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but one of the characters gets the vision of a different world, and again, I feel like Dick knows how it happened and why. If he, or like, it doesn't matter to him that much though. Like explaining it doesn't matter that much. Um, but I still feel like it happened for a reason. You know, so I don't feel like it's absurd. So maybe I'm trans realist. All right. Okay. Yeah. So now I was going for. These are all little notes I made for myself based on the Story Grid book, and I'm not sure how well I kept any of it, but sometimes when you write to discover. You know, okay, and I did not keep to my outline. Boy, I changed that thing. All right, so let's take a look at this. Oh, and let's see. Little over 3 months before the world was torn apart by the arrival of alien space gods and other madness, Paul and Misha, recently married, just out of college, settled into their first apartment. Discovered that Misha was pregnant. They kept the news secret until 3 months had passed. It was welcome news to their parents, friends, and family, especially since it came in summer, mid-August in Coral Springs, a suburb of Fort Lauderdale. By the way, I'm from that area. It's it's so hot. It's so hot. It's not just the location, it's the asphalt. But anyways, at that point, no one could pretend that the weather was pleasant. It seemed a hellish mix of asphalt, humidity, and heat. So the arrival of a new child was a pleasant distraction, for there was a shower to plan, baby clothes to buy, advice to give to the young couple, and especially the young mother, who was doted upon and cooed over. Relatives had not been pleased by the hasty marriage warm to the new couple. Misha's aunt and uncle visited one night, and after they had left their apartment and Paul was nearly done washing the dishes, he said, "Now they think I might not be so terrible." Misha laughed and kissed him on the neck. Oh, here comes the dirty part. It's not dirty. All right, yeah. A man doing the dishes makes you horny, she said, squeezing his butt. Paul put the last dish away just in time to follow Misha to the bedroom and the new bed that her parents had just delivered that same morning. Paul was gentle and tentative in his lovemaking, so a few minutes in, Misha stopped for a moment. "Jesus, Paul, is it the bed, me, or the baby? None of us are made of glass, big guy." "Sorry, honey." Sure. Now fuck me like a noob in that video game you like." Paul laughed and forgot his caution, and they fucked, and in their sweaty, messy afterglow, they saw the night sky light up, as bright as the day, a roll of thunder that would not stop, and so it went on for days, all over the world, and there was no escaping it in Coral Springs. With the bright sky and the thunder came monstrous beings, violet cylinders flying under the power of multiple tiny wings, blank-faced humanoids who could and did walk anywhere, appear anywhere, stand anywhere, even on air, and there were others. They claimed to be representatives of alien gods who had noticed humanity striving for the stars and were pleased. Paul and Misha heard all the reports, and like most people, they tried to hoard food, water, and fuel. And when they weren't gathering or hiding supplies, they huddled together, barely comforted by the presence of the other, just two mammals fearful of the unknown. Okay. So that was the first part that I wrote. And in case y'all didn't hear me, this is such a rough draft. I'm certain you can see the mistakes in it, but if you can't, don't worry. I see them for you. But actually, I think Zulurpi has seen my process. I'll go ahead and write a rough draft, and it's really important to finish it. And then I'll go back and rework it and add stuff to it, take stuff out. Because if it never gets finished, I can't do that. There's a point in your writing where you have to be the editor, the critic, the doubter. Does this belong? Is this right? Is this wrong? But before that point, you have to engage in discovery and write as much as you can, so that way the editor's got something to do. If you do it the other way around, you get writer's block. If the editor comes first, he tells you how much you suck. At least that's my experience. So anyways, some months later, when Misha was giving birth, Paul, her mother, and the doctors gasped. They had been expecting little nubs on her head. The ultrasound showed that much, but not their wriggling, or that her head was green and scaled. Misha's mother prayed to God and sobbed. Yeah. Very, very true, as if. Yeah. Somebody once said of Shakespeare that he never revised, and his friend and admirer Ben Jonson said, "Well, if that's true, I wish he had." And somebody else once said that even a minor poet could revise Shakespeare. Not that Shakespeare's not, possibly our greatest poet and playwright, but that there's always room to make it better. And lots of writers say that, as if, yeah. So, anyways, so when she was fully delivered, the extent of her deformity was clear. Instead of skin, she had green scales of various shades, darker around her extremities, lighter around her core, and on her head were little nubs that wriggled. But she cried, was alert, and otherwise seemed normal. Now, this word deformity here, I know I'm in the rough draft, but I want to point out for my audience that even though this story is written in the third person, there's some bleed over point of view from the other characters, and I think a lot of people in that room at that time see little Lissel being born. That's her name, and she's a little scaled green thing, and they see her as deformed. There's an instinctive reaction to look at a kid like that and say, and again, not for everybody, but and you'll see that in a moment. But that's why I use that word. It's not the author like judging. Okay, I know it's an imaginary baby, but there are people born with birth defects, and I'm not gonna judge a character and judge them. I'm still not sure about that word, but there you go. That was on my mind. So Misha held her and said, "Hey, baby girl, welcome to the world." Paul kissed Misha and kissed the baby. "Hey, where's my mom?" Misha asked. "I think she stepped out," Paul said. "I'll get her." Paul stepped outside of the delivery room. Norma, Misha's mother, was on the phone with someone, sobbing, telling the terrible story of her monstrous granddaughter to the other person. Paul grabbed the phone. It was her priest. "Father, Norma has to go," he said, and shut off the phone. Norma looked at him, teary-eyed, weepy. "What the fuck is wrong with you? Your daughter just gave birth, and yeah, our daughter is deformed and mutated or whatever, but she's our daughter, and Misha needs you." "Don't talk to me that way. That isn't my granddaughter in there. This isn't normal. She's not normal. She's demonic. The demons came, and she's one of them." "This is some fanatical bullshit, Norma. Go home." "Paul, do what's right. Kill that demon or I will." Norma started to walk toward the delivery room, but Paul tackled her. He tried to pin her, but she squirmed out of his grasp and ran into the delivery room and grabbed the child out of Misha's hand. Paul got up and ran in behind her. He stumbled. Norma threw the baby at the ground, head first. Paul punched Norma in the face and she went down. He picked up his screaming child, whose cries were matched by his wife. The nurses and doctors took the baby away to be treated, and security came for Norma. Misha asked Paul, "Why didn't you stop her?" He had no answer, only the same question. He and Misha were relieved afterwards when the doctors told them that their daughter, Lissel, was fine and would make a full recovery. Okay, so since I finished the rough draft, I can tell you that I'm going to change this scene. Now, it's too bad because for all its roughness, for all the little technical details that are off, and the things I got to add to write to it, I like this scene a lot, but somebody trying to kill a baby is a pretty big it's like a huge deal. You know, um, it should really be the climax of the story, and it's not. You know, um, so it's like don't get me wrong, Norma's still gonna be terrible in this scene. You know, I think she's gonna disown her daughter. You know, yell at her. You know, yeah. To be honest, my um, that can be pretty dramatic in a family. When my mom was pregnant with my little brother, she got into a terrible fight with her mother-in-law, you know, and like my mom remembers that to this day. Yeah, yeah, thanks, so. Yeah, she remembers that to this day. She tells me that she felt like she almost lost my little brother over a over a terrible screaming match, you know. Um, and so if Norma just does something like that in this scene and then disowns her daughter and takes away all the family support, it's going to set up the rest of the story in pretty much the same way. Um, and then maybe I'll write another story about somebody else spiking a kid, you know, like a football. I really wanted to use that metaphor, but it wouldn't fit. Sorry. Um, sorry. That's So soon after Lissel was born, Paul and Misha left social media. People asked about their baby, but they dared not post photos. Norma was not the only one who felt that children like Lissel were demonic or alien invaders or changelings and that they had to be killed. Their social circle shrank to the people they could trust, and no more. So when strangers knocked on their door one hot Saturday afternoon in August, by the way, that makes little Lissel about 3 months old. Right? No, more. I went so bad at the math. No, she was 3 months pregnant. Whatever. Whatever. It's August. It's hot again. I've got the terrible summer heat on my mind. Anyway, so Paul answered the door politely, but behind the door, in his left hand against his left leg, he had a shotgun. I really wanted to do the right leg. Maybe I can. When I was imagining, see, I was. Yeah. All right. Doesn't matter. The couple at the door were young, happy, smiling people. See, people would probably want you with a shotgun. Thin with pierced ears and noses and eyebrows, wearing ripped jeans, their hair dyed strange colors, both wearing makeup and baggy pants with the names of bands Paul didn't know. Both their faces smooth, both their genders deliberately obscured. Yeah. So I know people like this. You know, I don't know if I'm quite old enough to be an old fart, but I'm getting there. And you know, and I've met people who mess with their gender. I'm not sure they call themselves transgender as much as fluid, you know, or just enjoying, or just not feeling the need to differentiate themselves. Like, I'm clearly a boy, I'm clearly a girl, you know. Paul and Misha, and one of the things I want to do in the story, are more socially conservative. That doesn't mean that they're against anybody's rights, but on a personal level, you know, they kind of fall into like standard, or let's say like old-fashioned gender roles. And I wanted to have a contrast here with this couple. So, they had pamphlets, the cover of which said Black Star and showed an 8-sided pattern, 4 long diamonds in the cardinal directions and 4 shorter diamonds between them, and the diamonds all met on a point in the center. The star was black, but it was surrounded by a white nimbus, and the whole thing was on a black background. What do you want, Paul? Paul said. Hi, I'm Robert. This is Angie. We're with the Church of the Black Star, and we'd like to talk to you about your daughter. Oh, boy. Paul gripped the shotgun, but Misha came up behind him and put her hand on his, and he calmed down. Yeah. What do you want to say about her? Look, we know that things have been hard for you. Hard for anyone who has a unique child like yours, but our church is welcoming to all, and maybe you could stand to have a few friendly faces around. Now, um, let me just talk a little bit before Misha and Paul talk some more. Um, you know, when I look at the stuff that has to be added to this story, it's things like in scenes like this, where there's just conversation, you know, like the, I can put descriptions in here, you know, um, it doesn't have to be a lot, because the conversation is the important thing, but the descriptions can add to it, descriptions can also help with transitions, with unifying things. So when I look at this, that's the kind of stuff that I want to add in the next draft. Okay, so maybe you could stand to have a few friendly faces around. Misha and Paul looked at each other and nodded. Robert and Angie came in and sat at a small table just outside the kitchen. Misha offered them coffee and they accepted. Paul asked them, "What's your pitch?" Angie said, "Okay, sure, we're a church. And after what happened, maybe you don't want anything to do with anyone religious." But Glenn, how are you? Yeah. That makes sense, but what we don't have is ancient dogma masquerading as wisdom, and we have a God who is demonstrably real. But he's an alien, Misha said. True enough, Angie said, but if God were real, wouldn't he be alien to us? Completely unlike that song. Wouldn't that much power make one necessarily different than a mortal? I've heard enough, Paul said. Just leave your brochures behind. Sure, they said. It was nice meeting you, Robert said. Misha agreed, but Paul said nothing. Misha's gaze turned to Paul, but he stood his ground. Once Robert and Angie were out of earshot, Misha said, "What the fuck, Paul?" "I don't need a God or a church," he said. "That's not fair," she said. "Not everyone is crazy." Honey, there's so much power in religion, and now God is real. People go crazy. They always go crazy. That's not fair and not logical and not true. I need a church. I need the community. We need it. We can't get along by ourselves, not with Lissel the way she is. We need their support. Lissel and I need it. Are you with us, Paul? Paul waved his hands as if he were an agitated conductor and turned around and paced. Yeah. I'm good, McGlenn. Oh, by the way, waving his hands like an agitated conductor is what my father-in-law does when he's like upset and nervous. Pacing is what I do. So I put the two of them together. Well, was this what his life had come to? Their life? And an ultimatum. She hadn't exactly said it, but it was coming. All right, Paul said. We'll join. Misha exhaled. Thank God, or whoever. I couldn't do this without you, honey. They hugged and kissed, but Paul wondered what kind of man he was to give in like he did. Yeah. Yeah. So something here. I'm going to pat myself on the back right now. I've got a good through line for Paul in this story. Paul feels this burden of manhood, and it just weighs on him. And, it's going to play a big role in the last part of the story. And one more thing. You'll notice I'm not using quotation marks. Maybe I'll include them in the next draft. Yeah. Yeah. So, I hate the look of them. At least, I hate the look of them in my stories. I hate the look of quotation marks. Maybe it's because I've taught so much composition that these little suckers look formal to me, And I quote, Paul said, "We'll join," unquote. Yeah. When I first noticed a writer not using quotation marks for dialogue, it was Junot Diaz. In a brief in in The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, a great novel, and not just him, well, sorry, not just that novel, but his short stories too. And the collections Drown and This Is How You Lose Her. And what I noticed is that when you don't have quotation marks, you're not the narrative becomes less reliable. And I'm a fan of so I'm doing a third person narration. I'm omniscient like God in this story. I'm the one creating everything. And then here I am, and I'm saying, this is exactly what Paul said. I mean, that is the meaning of quotes. That's exactly what Paul said. But I leave this out, and now, is it exactly what Paul said? Maybe, maybe not. Does it get a little confusing? Sometimes. Misha exhaled. Thank God, or whoever. I mean, I guess I could write, something like. I could do that. But when the lines are blurred just a little bit, just occasionally, not all the time. I think most of the time you can tell who's saying what, but again, it adds a little bit of that unreliable. It makes me an unreliable narrator, and I like being unreliable. As if, yeah, but he did set them off with like hyphens or dashes, if I remember correctly, or am I remembering that incorrectly? I'll go ahead and look up I'll go ahead and look up his stories again. Yeah, I like Joyce a lot. But when I was reading him, I wasn't trying to write stories. Yeah. Okay. So he what you want to know something? As if you read some Latin American literature in the original Spanish, you will see writers use sometimes hyphens or dashes instead of quotes. Maybe I should do that. Okay. And enough about that. Thank you all for putting up with. Yeah. And so Zolaire, but yeah, well, so let me talk a little bit about the unreliable narrator. The unreliable narrator is one of the great innovations of fiction, and it's typically a first-person narrator. It's typically like, well, a great example is The Great Gatsby. The narrator in that is Nick, and page 1, he tells you how honest he is. Isn't that guy a liar? Yeah, my father, the judge, always told me to be honest. When somebody tells you that, they're a liar. Or, now to be fair to Nick, I don't think he's any more a liar than anybody else. But if you as the reader keep in mind how unreliable he is, how he wants to be seen as honest, it just makes makes reading the novel more interesting. Or one of my favorite fantasy series is Roger Zelazny's Chronicles of Amber, especially the first 5 books, in which you have this first-person narrator, Corwin, who's telling his story to somebody. You don't find out who it is until the 5th book. He's telling the story to his estranged son. So this entire story that he's been narrating, he must have been changing details to make himself not seem as bad as he really is. That's such a great reveal, and again, it's fun to have an unreliable narrator. But the problem with the unreliable narrator is that the unreliable narrator is a first-person narrator. So I'm not a fan of first person writing for myself. I like reading it, but I don't like writing it. I like the freedom of third person, you know. But then when I'm a third person writer, it's sort of like I've taken on the mantle of God, and I look at all these people and I go in their heads. Yeah. So to undercut that a little bit, you know, um, we leave off the quotes. But now let's get to the third part of the story. You know, the payoff. You've been with me this long. Here's where the crazy shit happens. Um, the Black Star services were nothing like the churches that Misha and Paul had known. Mr. Hartwell, the head teacher, not priest, explained that the Black Star did not need human worship, but rather humans needed to understand it and the universe better. There were prayers and songs at the beginning of the service and at the end, but Mr. Hartwell explained that those were for the sake of the worshipers, not for the Black Star. Yeah. Paul loved the services. They were classes, really, explaining the true nature of the universe. Paul loved it initially, but after a few weeks, he started having visions of when things were about to happen. Sometimes a few seconds ahead of time, sometimes a few minutes, and once a few hours. He asked Mr. Hartwell about it, who told him that as he concentrated on the true nature of the universe, his mind would expand, and that it was a good thing. Paul was not so sure. Ooh, Paul, with your self-doubt. Okay. Misha did not have the patience to concentrate on the words, but she loved the community, the plant. This is a reference to magic words that Paul's concentrating on. And then I cut it, so I'll have to change that. But anyways, but she loved the community, planning events, and building friendships. Mr. Hartwell noted once that such familiar activities are power, too. That was a reference, again, to the words of power that Paul was studying. As for Lissel, she played with the other children. She was agile, tough, and fearless, but not mean. Thus, things were going well for the family. Misha's networking helped Paul find a job, and Paul's increasing ability to see the future gave him great prestige in the Black Star community. And Lissel was growing up loved, loving, and strong. Everything was... I'm writing here almost in a summary kind of mode. It's okay to do that in a rough draft. In the final draft, you got to have the details. Everything was fine until one day when Paul had a terrible vision. Lissel was grown, a woman, and she was at a bar or a nightclub, and there were images of the Black Star everywhere, and Paul recognized Mr. Hartwell. And they dragged Lissel to an altar and stripped her, and she was screaming for help and pleading for mercy, and Paul would see no more of it. Okay, yeah. This is what happens in Lissel the Gorgon. You know, so, except Mr. Hartwell's not there. Oh, I wonder why. Okay. He grabbed his shotgun, put it in a gym bag, and went to see Mr. Hartwell, who let him right in. Of course. He loves Paul. Paul, what's on your mind? Mr. Hartwell, do you think these visions could ever be wrong? Have they ever been wrong, Paul? Never. I've stopped bad things from happening before, but if I hadn't done anything, the visions would have come true. That answers your question, then. Well, I saw farther than I'd ever seen. 20 years. And I saw you and Lissel at a service in some nightclub in Fort Lauderdale. Paul had a vision. The son of a bitch Hartwell going for a gun in his desk. Paul pulled out his shotgun and shot Hartwell in the head before that vision could come true. Hartwell's brains and skull were splattered against the wall behind his office. Paul gasped. More visions came. The police would be here soon. If he went around the back, he could avoid them and everyone else. He walked out of Hartwell's office, avoided the police, and he had another vision. There was no hope for him. He'd be arrested, tried, sent to the gallows by a district attorney eager to appeal to anti-New God sentiment. Misha was going to be a wreck. She'd give Lissel up to his brother and sister. Maybe to her brother and sister, since I introduced them before, right? He felt a wave of guilt, drowned by it. He'd torn apart his family. And then he had one more vision. Lissel on that altar anyway. A black star opened. An 8-sided void that consumed her. Again, he's having a vision of Lissel the Gorgon, you know, of the events that happened in that story. Paul wanted to die. The shame, the realization that killing Hartwell hadn't changed anything. The damage he'd done to his family, his vision of prison, his vision of dying on the gallows, left to dangle by an incompetent hangman. Now, by the way, the gallows, since when do we hang people? Right? But that's a little bit of retro sci-fi on my part. Anti-death penalty groups are making it harder to buy the drugs to kill people via lethal injection, or I guess through the gas chamber, or maybe that's just expensive. The electric chair is seen as cruel, and it pretty much is, but a well-done hanging is inexpensive and relatively merciful. So I'm just imagining that it comes back. I might not keep that, but still, I like that. Left to dangle by an incompetent hangman. He had the shotgun, dying on his own terms. Isn't that what a man would do? But if he did that, he could be of no use to his family. He called Misha, confessed what he'd done, and then he called the police. And Zularby is traditional. That's okay, Zularby. All right, and that's it. He kills Hartwell. He calls the police. He's gonna go to jail. And he'll probably go on death row. So it's one of those happy stories. Now it was gonna. Would you believe it was worse? Like, wow, how could it be worse than like something like the Dead Zone, but not as happy? So here's how it could be worse. Okay. Paul and Misha fall in with a group of worshippers of the new gods. Paul doesn't trust them, but Misha needs some kind of family. This leads to some tension between Paul and Misha. Then Paul has a vision of Lissel, older, suffering at the hands of the god they supposedly worship is terrible, and he snaps. He decides to kill his family and himself. He kills Misha. Lissel runs and falls into a canal. When Paul finds her, she seems dead, so he kills himself. She survives due to the stamina of her unearthly form, but her future is uncertain. Yeah, so I was going to make it worse. But as I'm writing this story, I realized that Paul doesn't want to kill his family. Hartwell, sure, but not Misha and not Lissel, and he makes a tough choice at the end, to call the police, and turn himself in. So that is this rough draft. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I could either revise this, or I could go on to the next part of Lissel's story. Honestly, I think I'm going to go on to the next part of Lissel's story, and I'm going to keep on writing Lissel's story, until I get to Lissel the Gorgon, where those dramatic events occur. Then I'll go back and revise. So, am I writing like a novel or a novella, a mosaic novel? I'm not sure. And that's basically it, guys. Thanks for hanging out, and I will. I'll see you later. I'm gonna try to be on Journey's stream tonight. Though, anybody know whether that's going to be Twitch or Picarto? I'm not sure. All right. So thank you and good evening.